Hi, I'm Bob Wheeler, and welcome to the Berean Observer, where we search the scriptures daily to see if these things are true. This past Tuesday, of course, we saw this presidential debate between Kamala Harris and Donald Trump, and basically it was a situation in which the candidates were constantly hurling insults and accusations against each other, half truths and sometimes downright falsehoods. At one point, Harris accused Trump of wanting to impose a sales tax on the American people. And the reality which he was talking about was that he was talking about a tariff on imported goods, which, of course, would have the effect of raising prices on imported goods. But the idea there, of course, is that it would eventually create more manufacturing jobs here in the United States. Trump, for his part, made the bizarre claim that there are illegal immigrants eating people's cats and dogs in this town in Ohio. And so it went on for an hour and a half. But basically, what it boils down to is that politicians want to win elections. And in order to do that, they have to make themselves look good and make their opponents look bad. And that often leads to falsehoods and misinformation, where they distort their opponent's record or, glorify their own. But the thing about it that we have to keep in mind is that telling lies is sinful, and sin brings bad results. Basically, lying and slander are violations of the ninth commandment, which say, "You shall not bear false witness against your neighbor." And one passage that talks a bit about it, this in the Bible, is in Proverbs chapter 6, and reading verses 16 through 19. And reading this from the New King James Version, it says, "These 6 things the Lord hates, and yes, 7 are an abomination to him: a proud look, a lying tongue, hands that shed innocent blood, a heart that devises wicked plans, feet that are swift to running to evil, a false witness who speaks lies, and one who sows discord." So you notice that first of all it says that one of the things that God hates, first of all it says that there are several things that God hates and that are an abomination to him, which means that there are certain things, certain forms of human behavior that is absolutely disgusting and abhorrent to God. And the first one, of course, is a lying tongue that he mentions in verse 17. And then, second of all, it goes on to talk about a false witness who speaks lies in verse 19a, where basically it would mean, first of all, of course, the idea of bearing false witness under oath. Lying in a courtroom, giving false testimony in a courtroom, where you're either, condemning somebody who is basically innocent, or you're trying to exonerate somebody who was actually guilty and had actually committed the crime. And then it could be used more broadly to speaking falsehoods about others and destroying their reputations in the process. And then it also says in verse 19, "And the one who sows discord among brethren." And the problem is that very often the effect of lies is to cause divisions within society. And people respond in anger, and it actually causes divisions among people who were previously friends. There was an English Puritan named Thomas Watson who said, "This sin highly provokes God. Ananias and Sapphira were struck dead for telling a lie." Then another passage to look at is also in Proverbs chapter 16 and verses 27 and 28, where we read, "An ungodly man digs up evil, and it is on his lips like a burning fire. A perverse man sows strife, and a whisperer separates the best of friends." Now here we see some of the ill effects, the damage, the destruction that's caused by lying and telling falsehoods. When it talks about in verse 17 about an ungodly man, the Hebrew word that's used there kind of signifies the idea of a worthless, no good bum. And it says that he digs up evil. In other words, he's deliberately looking for bad things to say about someone else. And it says it is on his lips like a burning fire. Notice he can't wait to tell others. He's just eager to spread the falsehood, this racy information that he just came up with. And it kind of reminds me of, back years ago. This is kind of like a well-known human phenomenon. Back years ago, they used to talk about yellow journalism, where the newspapers would what would sell newspapers is bad news. So you have these blazing headlines across the front page of the paper. So and so did thus and so on. And nowadays we have modern social media where there's very little restrictions at all on what gets posted on the social media, and a lot of times a lot of wild conspiracy theories and rumors and so on get spread on the social media. And unfortunately, a lot of people don't have the discernment to ask themselves the question, where is this information coming from and how do they know that it's true? Okay? And then he goes on here to says in verse 28, a perverse man sows strife. In other words, a person that's bent on this kind of thing, spreading falsehoods and so on about other people, winds up creating conflict and divisions within society. It causes strife. And he causes divisions by saying outrageous things about others. And then he says, and a whisperer separates the best of friends. And of course, here when he's using the word whisper, he's talking about somebody who's gossiping, saying, psst, 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 what? And a gossip destroys relationships by causing conflict, even among friends. Again, Thomas Watson said, lying is a sin that unfits man for civil society. How can you converse or bargain with a man when you cannot trust a word that he says? Would you buy a used car off of somebody who had a reputation for being dishonest? The answer is no. And again, Watson said, the slanderer wounds three at once. He wounds him that is slandered. He wounds him to whom he reports the slander by causing uncharitable thoughts to arise in his mind against the party slandered. And he wounds his own soul by reporting of another what is false. So that's some of the ill effects that, you could argue, well, I'm just talking. These are just words that are coming out of my mouth. I'm not hurting anyone. I'm not physically touching anyone. And yet, the fact of the matter is you really can hurt people by the things that you say about them. And that's why it's such a serious sin. And then I think it has to be kept in mind, that ultimately we're going to have to give an account to God for everything that we say that comes out of our mouths. In Matthew chapter 12, Jesus was he was accused by some Pharisees for casting out demons by Beelzebub. And of course, it was kind of a pretty slanderous thing to say about Christ. He was not demon possessed. And so what he says here in verses 34 through 37 in Matthew chapter 12, brood of vipers, how can you, being evil, speak good things? For out of the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaks. A good man, out of the good treasure of his heart, brings forth good things. And an evil man, out of the evil treasure, brings forth evil things. But I say to you, that for every idle word men may speak, they will give an account of it in the day of judgment. For by your words you will be justified, and by your words you will be condemned. Now, it's interesting that in verses 35 and 36, he basically, or 34 and 35, he basically indicates that bad words are an indication of something deeper that is inside the person's heart. That what comes out of your mouth is an expression of the inward thoughts and feelings and actions and so on. And so if you hate it, so a lot of times when somebody says something bad about somebody else, it indicates that there's like an inner hatred that the person has or disgust for the person. And then he goes on and he talks about how that we will be judged for what we say. And he points out that there's going to be a day of judgment in which each and every single one of us as human beings is going to have to stand before God, our Creator and Lord, and have to give an account for what we do. He says, for I say to you that for every idle word men may speak, they will give account of it in the day of judgment. And you might figure, well, why would God make a big deal out of an idle word? An idle word is nothing. Well, no. It's because of the inward feelings that the word betrays and the damage that you cause by speaking these words. And then he says, and so then that's why he says then that by your words you will be justified and by your words you will be condemned. And I think it's got to be kept in mind that we are ultimately accountable to God Himself for our thoughts, feelings, and actions. It's not just simply a matter of what we think we can get away with, or the standards of society, and everybody's doing it and that kind of thing. No, 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 no. Someday, every single one of us is going to have to stand before Almighty God and give an account for the way we've lived our lives here on this planet. And that's going to include the types of things that we said, the words that came out of our mouths, the junk and the garbage that we spread, while we're here on Earth. Now, politics, of course, is usually divisive, is competitive, and so each candidate is going to go out of his way to make himself look better than the other. He's going to put himself on a pedestal and he's brag about things that he did and maybe he didn't actually do, and then he's going to try to vilify his opponent and make him look as terrible as you possibly can. And unfortunately, modern internet media makes the matters worse because it makes it easier to spread falsehoods and slander. And I think it has to be pointed out that America has an deeper underlying problem. You're taking a look at the breakdown of the family structure. You're talking about the financial hardship that many families face. You're talking about the spread of crime and drugs. And a lot of this, I think, is the result of the breakdown in public morality. And political slander, though, is only making the problem worse. Basically, what you're doing is you're heaping wood on the fire and exacerbating the divisions that already exist in American society. But we must never forget that we are ultimately accountable to God for the way that we live our lives. And someday we're going to have to give an account to Him. So keep that in mind as we go through this election. And thank you very much for listening, and we hope that you tune by again. Thank you. Bye.